Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Dippy Does It All, the show where curiosity meets chaos. And today we're plunging deep, and I mean deep, into one of the most jaw-dropping modern tragedies tied to one of the most legendary disasters in history, the Titanic. That's right, we're talking about OceanGate's Titan submersible, a vessel that set out to give people a front row seat to the wreckage of the Titanic, until things went catastrophically wrong. Inspired by the Netflix special The Titan, the OceanGate submersible disaster, and HBO Max's Discovery documentary, Implosion, the Titanic sub-disaster, today's episode is a dive into hubris, innovation, ambition, and ultimately tragedy. So strap in, or should I say, seal yourself in, because this story is as surreal as it is haunting. First off, I have a couple of announcements. You may have noticed we have a new theme song, and that is an original creation by Mr. Riley Krieger. I'm very thankful that he offered his talents to create a theme for the podcast. So thank you. Appreciate you, Riley. And I would also like to announce a new series called Sippin on History. I started this with Kentucky Peerless, and now we are going to feature the Titan disaster. For context, in this series, I'll be diving into fascinating historic events, stories, and people from the past, breaking them down in a way that's fun, interesting, and easy to follow. Think of it as taking a little time to sip on history together, exploring the moments that shaped our world. Whether it's legendary figures, pivotal battles, current events, or curious cultural tidbits, I'll do my best to bring the stories to life. Sometimes with a little commentary, sometimes with fun facts, and always with a fresh perspective. Stay tuned, because history has never tasted this good. Now, let's dive into this episode of the Titan submersible disaster. Let's set the scene. The Titanic lies about 2.5 miles below the surface of the Atlantic, an eerie graveyard of steel and legacy. In 2017, a man named Stockton Rush, an Ivy League Princeton graduate trained in aerospace engineering. He had a flair for drama and dreams of space after watching Star Wars and Star Trek. However, he ended up setting his sights downward instead of upward. He has been quoted to say, "All the cool stuff is underwater." His company, OceanGate, promised the unthinkable. For $250,000, you could board Titan, a submersible designed to carry 5 people to the Titanic wreckage. A first-class ticket for the Titanic in 1912 was $4,350. Adjusting to today's inflation, that would equate to $144,415. So the cost to dive the deep ocean on the Titan is near double that. Stockton saw himself as a disruptor, a kind of Elon Musk of the deep sea. His mission was to support science, promote ocean exploration, and democratize adventure. And what better place to start than with the Titanic, the ship of dreams? The Titanic is one of the most recognizable names in history for a few key reasons. And those same reasons explain why people are fascinated, some even obsessed, with visiting its wreck. Stockton himself said there are 3 words every person knows: Coca-Cola, God, and Titanic. So why is the Titanic so recognizable? When it sank on April 15th, 1912, over 1,500 people perished. It was one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters ever. The ship was thought to be unsinkable, which made its loss even more shocking and symbolic. The Titanic represented the peak of luxury, engineering, and arrogance of the time. Calling it unsinkable turned it into a haunting irony. It became a cautionary tale about overconfidence and ignoring warnings, timeless themes that keep it relevant. In James Cameron's 1997 film, Titanic solidified its place in pop culture forever. I mean, Jack, Rose, throwing the heart of the ocean, 56 carats, into the ocean. The whole door conspiracy, people argue still to this day if she should have let him sit on that piece of wood with her. And my personal favorite line from Titanic is, "Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls." I don't know why, but that sounded a little creepy. Let's take a little detour. Speaking of one of the greatest films of all time, James Cameron, the guy that made Titanic iconic. Why is he so obsessed with it? I mean, most directors, they wrap a movie and they move on. Not with this guy. Cameron keeps going back, literally, to the bottom of the ocean. So what's behind his deep, pun intended, obsession? Cameron's love for deep-sea exploration goes way beyond Hollywood. This isn't just a movie director chasing box office numbers. He's a legit ocean explorer, with over 30 dives to the Titanic wreck. That's more than most marine scientists. In 2012, he even went to the Mariana Trench, solo. And in case you don't know, that's the deepest part of the ocean. Basically, if Aquaman had a LinkedIn, Cameron would probably outrank him. The Titanic story has everything. It has all of the ingredients of a great film. Romance, a class divide, heroism, cowardice, hubris, tragedy, and a ticking clock. Nothing gives suspense more than a ticking clock. James Cameron called Titanic Shakespeare at sea, but with rivets. And it's true. The story is hauntingly human. Real people, real choices, real consequences. It's not just a disaster. It's a mirror of society. Cameron is a detail freak. He wanted to recreate the Titanic down to the wallpaper. But it wasn't enough to build a replica. He had to see the real thing. So what did he do? He built custom submersibles, cameras, and lighting rigs just to film 2.5 miles under the ocean. While most directors are yelling, "Action!" on a soundstage, Cameron's yelling it inside a sub. That's next level dedication. And James Cameron made Titanic so he could fund more underwater missions, and he admits it. He once said, Titanic was the most expensive dive expedition in history, disguised as a movie. The film made over $2.2 billion, and with that success, Cameron launched a second career, not just as a filmmaker, but as a full-blown explorer. He went on to create Ghosts of the Abyss and Aliens of the Deep, which is basically an underwater IMAX experience that mixes science with cinema. He doesn't want to just tell stories. He wants to know them, touch them, see them, test the physics himself. Titanic gave him a playground for his curiosity. He got to blend technology, history, and adventure into one massive project. And Cameron feels something spiritual about the wreck. He's talked about being moved by the story of Isidore and Ida Strauss, the elderly couple who died together on the ship. And fun fact, they were the great-grandparents of Stockton Rush's wife. Cameron said the wreck's decay reminds him how fragile human achievement is against the power of time and nature. And that hits, because the Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of human ambition, and it ended in catastrophe. James Cameron is obsessed with the Titanic because it's everything he loves, wrapped into one haunting, beautiful, tragic story. Big emotion, deep water, big tech, real risk, human drama. For him, the Titanic isn't just a movie or a shipwreck. It's a mission, a metaphor, and yeah, maybe a bit of a personal calling. It's also important to note the Titanic is referenced in many books, documentaries, and memes. Few disasters have been so widely dramatized and romanticized. The shipwreck laid undiscovered for 73 years, nearly 13,000 feet below the ocean's surface. Its location, its preservation, and its eeriness have made it a kind of underwater time capsule that still fascinates scientists, historians, and the public. Why would people want to visit the wreck is a question you might be asking yourself. There are a few thoughts. Historic pilgrimage, like visiting the pyramids, Auschwitz, or Pearl Harbor. Going to Titanic's resting place can feel like paying respect to a major moment in human history. Extreme tourism. For the ultra-rich or thrill seekers, seeing the Titanic isn't just about curiosity, it's about doing what few others have done. It's often pitched as once-in-a-lifetime experience. The price tag? $250,000. Bragging rights? Priceless. I mean, think of that Instagram post. Another reason to visit is scientific and archaeological curiosity. For some, it's about exploration and data. The ship is slowly deteriorating, and researchers are racing to document it before it disappears forever. And then connection to human story. Titanic was full of real people. Immigrants, aristocrats, newlyweds, crew. And their stories live on. Seeing it in person, even through a viewport, makes the tragedy visceral and personal. The Titanic is famous because it's more than a shipwreck. It's a symbol of class, ambition, loss, arrogance, and romance. And people want to visit it not just to see steel and rust, but to touch history, to feel awe, and maybe, for a moment, to feel part of something that changed the world. Okay, now that we've talked about the Titanic, let's go back and talk about the Titan. The Titan was the first of its kind, a carbon fiber submersible built with the idea of being lighter and more maneuverable than traditional metal hulls. It was also supposed to be much cheaper. The goal was to have multiple carbon fiber subs. But here's the catch. Carbon fiber wasn't approved for manned deep-sea vehicles. Carbon fiber is not approved for deep-sea use, particularly in pressure hulls for submersibles, because of how it behaves under extreme pressure. Here's a breakdown of why it's not considered safe for those applications. It fails catastrophically. Carbon fiber is strong but brittle. Unlike metal, like titanium and steel, which bend and deform before failing, carbon fiber can literally shatter or implode without warning. In deep-sea environments where external pressure is immense, up to 16,000 psi, at the Titanic wreck depth, there is no room for error. It's difficult to predict the failure. The material properties of carbon fiber can vary depending on how it's woven, layered, and cured. Tiny manufacturing defects, fatigue over time, and unseen micro cracks can cause sudden structural failure. And these are extremely hard to detect even with advanced scanning techniques. There's a poor long-term compression strength. Carbon fiber excels in tension, like being pulled apart, but deep-sea vessels are under extreme compression. Over time, repeated pressure cycles, dives, can cause the resin or fibers to weaken or delaminate. And most importantly, the organizations that certify vessels for deep-sea use do not approve carbon fiber pressure hulls because they lack a proven track record. Titanium or steel are preferred because they've been tested over decades and have predictable failure modes. And not like that wasn't enough, but the Titan wasn't even registered with a country or classed by any maritime authority. That's a big deal. That means no one wanted to stamp their approval on it. When I was thinking about doing this review episode, I was wondering why they named it Titan. And I found it was named after multiple symbolic inspirations. And the name carries a layered meaning. Titan, as in Titanic. The most direct link is to the RMS Titanic, the famous shipwreck it was built to explore. Titan is essentially a shortened nod to the Titanic. Stockton Rush, the OceanGate CEO, chose the Titanic wreck as the focus of his deep-sea tourism because of its cultural significance and name recognition. Naming the sub Titan kept that branding tightly aligned. Titan as in Greek mythology. In mythology, the Titans were powerful, primordial deities who came before the Olympian gods. They symbolized great strength, ambition, and scale. Traits Stockton Rush likely felt reflected his mission to explore the deep and push technological boundaries. However, the Titans were also known for being overthrown due to hubris, which casts a tragic parallel to the story of the sub. Titan, as in Saturn's moon, some interpret the name as a reference to Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, which is of particular interest in space exploration because it has a thick atmosphere and liquid oceans. Stockton Rush originally wanted to be an astronaut, and Titan, the moon, represents the spirit of extreme exploration. Only here, turned inward, toward the ocean. In essence, the name Titan was meant to invoke power, exploration, innovation, and legacy. But in hindsight, it also mirrors the fatal overconfidence and symbolic tragedy of the very ship it sought to honor. In 2018, OceanGate held a christening. Stockton claimed the sub was invulnerable. A red flag considering they literally said the same thing about the Titanic. They worked with the University of Washington's Applied Physics Lab, and Boeing engineers were initially helping with the development of the vessel. Stockton wanted a cylinder shape because it's better for doing things, even though most deep submersibles are designed as spheres to help with the pressure. The Applied Physics Lab was doing a lot of pressure testing with a scaled-down model, and never once did the vessel pass any of the pressure tests. Multiple times, the carbon fiber hull ended in an implosion, and they were unable to predict when it was going to happen. It was reported in the documentary that eventually, due to the costs, OceanGate stopped working with Boeing and the Applied Physics Lab, and they began building the Titan with a carbon fiber hull. Very interesting that the scaled-down models were not passing the tests, but we decided to move forward with a full-size hull. And then came the test dives. On the test dives, they frequently reported hearing these cracking sounds, which the experts were saying was the delaminating of the carbon fiber. And he would just keep going down. Crack. I feel like it's more like snap. Crackle. Pop. There was popping noises on dive 62. And then on dive 80, there was a large bang. There was an acoustics monitoring system on board that they thought would help predict the failure of the carbon fiber. After dive 80, it started showing a change in the data, and it kept getting worse. Former employees, including the head of engineering and their lead pilot, warned OceanGate of the dangers of the carbon fiber hull. Many of them were even fired for suggesting the hull was unsafe. And there was a whistleblower, David Lockridge. He filed a formal complaint, but ended up being so buried in lawsuits, he withdrew his complaint. OceanGate even considered promoting their accountant to be the sub-pilot for optics, but she quit. And as more problems emerged, Stockton ignored the signs. He even wore earplugs to block out the cracking sounds, dismissing them as carbon fiber seasoning. Yes, really. That's what he told people it was doing. Okay, so let's put ourselves out on the ocean. We are on the open ocean, and it is a nice day, and we can hear the water coming over the boat. And we can hear a little hum of the engine. And we're just gently bobbing up and down and swaying back and forth as we make way through the waves. After the 2022 season, the Titan was left to sit out all winter on a dock during the polar vortex, which does not seem like a very good idea. So when 2023 came, the first dive was on June 18th. The Titan launched under calm seas and blue skies from the support ship named the Polar Prince. At 9:14 a.m., the descent of the sub begins. At 10:47:27, a transmission comes saying 2 weights are dropped. At 10:47:33, the last ping is heard. Between those transmissions, on the deck of the Polar Prince, a loud bang was heard. So this is about an hour and a half in the dive. Very loud bang. And one thing I would like to point out, in water, sound travels fast, 1,500 meters a second. So fast that the bang would reach the surface before the final ping was even transmitted. That bang was the implosion. What followed was a massive international search effort. Planes, ships, sonar, remotely operated vehicles, all scouring the area twice the size of Connecticut and 2 miles deep. Interesting enough, the U.S. Coast Guard already had a C-130 on deck in St. John's because they were conducting international ice patrol missions, which are in place because of the Titanic disaster. Jurisdiction was also difficult to determine since the vessel was not classed or flagged. At first, there was a lot of hope from the public. They had approximately 48 hours of oxygen on board. They were thinking maybe the sub just broke down and they're just lost and we'll find them alive. But after 4 agonizing days, debris was found. The pressure had instantly obliterated Titan. Experts say the implosion would have been quicker than a blink. Painless but devastating. The carbon fiber didn't just break, it turned to sludge. Among the wreckage, a pen, some business cards, and Titanic stickers. Human artifacts sealed in sand. Some see Stockton Rush as a villain, and others as a visionary. He was described as bold, charming, even inspirational to some. Unfortunately, he made calculated risks with uncalculated consequences. OceanGate marketed Titan as safe, a pioneering experience. However, under the surface, literally and figuratively, was a string of shortcuts, ignored warnings, and growing financial pressures. So far, there have been no criminal charges. The full report from the Coast Guard Board of Investigation is still pending. But since the sub wasn't classed, flagged, or held to common regulatory standards, who is going to be held accountable? As one Coast Guard official said in the documentary, in the Coast Guard, a common saying is, laws are written in blood. So in the future, there's probably going to be new regulations. And yet, even with all the red flags, people still bought in because that's the power of dreams. But when you invite the public, especially a 19-year-old, into an experimental submersible with a video game controller, you take on more than risk. You should be taking on responsibility. 5 people lost their lives. One of them that we've talked about, Stockton Rush, was the CEO of OceanGate. One of the other mission specialists, as they call them, was Paul Henry Nargeolet. If there was ever someone you'd call the voice of the Titanic, it was Paul Henry, a retired French Navy commander turned deep-sea explorer. Paul Henry wasn't just familiar with the Titanic, he knew it better than almost anyone alive. He had made over 35 dives to the wreck site and led many of the explorations that recovered thousands of artifacts from the debris field. He even accompanied James Cameron on his dives. If you've ever seen Titanic relics in museums, like jewelry, dishes, or personal letters, there's a good chance he's the one who brought them back from 13,000 feet below. Paul Henry was often referred to as Mr. Titanic, and not just because of how many times he visited. He had an emotional connection to the site, one built on decades of study, respect, and storytelling. To him, the Titanic wasn't just a shipwreck. It was a grave, a lesson, and a legacy. His role in the 2023 Titan expedition brought tragic irony. The world's foremost Titanic expert died visiting the very ship he helped bring back into global consciousness. In a way, Paul Henry dedicated his life to preserving the memory of Titanic's passengers and crew. And now, his name is etched into that story forever. Also on board were a couple of businessmen, Hamish Harding, Shahzada Dawood, and his 19-year-old son, Suleiman. They were called mission specialists, a creative legal workaround that blurred the line between passenger and crew. Their deaths shocked the world. The tragedy trended for weeks. People were joking, debating, and mourning. But behind it all was something real. A reminder that ambition without accountability can crush more than dreams. It can destroy lives. These 5 individuals were explorers, dreamers, pioneers, people who looked to the depths, not with fear, but with wonder. They risked everything in pursuit of curiosity, discovery, and legacy. And though their voyage ended in tragedy, their stories have left an indelible mark on the world. No words can ease the pain of that loss, but I hope you know that their names, their ambitions, and their courage won't be forgotten. They dared to do what few would, and their memory now lives in some vast, eternal ocean that called to them. May they rest in peace, and may those left behind find strength, comfort, and healing. While I was watching these documentaries, I was asking myself, would you get in this submersible? And the answer is no. First off, there's no hatch like a traditional sub. They seal you inside with bolts. And just that act alone, even before being put in the water, makes me feel claustrophobic. I just cannot imagine being sealed into something that you don't have control to get out of. And you all know that I like to be in control. I do look at this, though, similar to the recent push for space tourism and people that climb Mount Everest and things like that. This is an ultimate thrill. And I wonder, can innovation ever go too far? And how do we balance the spirit of exploration with responsibility and safety? If you're fascinated or honestly just shaken by the Titan sub disaster, I highly recommend checking out the documentaries on Netflix and HBO. These aren't just news clips. You get real interviews, never before seen footage, and a much deeper understanding of the people involved, both those on board and the loved ones they left behind. Netflix documentary is titled Titan, the Ocean Gate Submersible Disaster. And on HBO, it's called Implosion, the Titanic sub disaster. Both give you chilling images of the sub, expert breakdowns of what went wrong, and the human side of the story. It also focuses a lot on the Coast Guard investigation. It's heavy stuff, but it's powerful. Both had different information to share, and both are worth watching. It's one thing to talk about implosions and pressure ratings, but seeing the faces and the stories behind it all hits differently. So if you're curious, or just want to understand this tragedy better, fire up those streamers and prepare to go deep. So let's finish this one up, shall we? The Titan was meant to challenge the abyss, but in doing so, it mirrored the very ship it set out to visit. Bold, admired, and ultimately doomed by belief in its own invincibility. Titanic, Titan, 2 ships, 1 ocean, same fate. So thanks for listening to Dippy Does It All. If you like this deep dive, follow, review, or leave me a sonar ping. Message, wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and maybe stay above sea level.